All right. Hi, I'm Robert Ferguson with Wheatstone. Hope everybody's having a great day or evening as it may be where you are. Thanks for joining us today. I want to say a quick word of thanks to the folks at the Elenos Group, the SBE, and Xperi for putting this all together and allowing us to present today. Um, some of you may know me from my days at Susquehanna Radio or Wide Orbit. I've been in the business for a long time on the radio side. I've been a sports director, assistant PD, production director, and of course a radio engineer since I started in the industry in the 90s. I've been with Wheatstone since 2017 and things were fairly normal in support until recently. And I've lost the count, the number of engineers. Let me make sure that I am moving the screen there. That I've talked to in the last few weeks who have questions about setting up remote access to studio systems and remote talent. Of course, we're in unprecedented times, and many of us have had to think on our feet and come up with solutions out of the box and in the box and around the box. And some of those solutions I want to cover today, like our virtual mixer application, remote LXE, Glass E, and other client software that can help get you through some of this. And what I've discovered also in these calls is more than not is a lot of you broadcasters are more prepared for this pandemic than you may have thought. So if you've got this, then we add maybe something like this, and then we also add something like this and this, then you've got your solutions. Now, if you have a USB mic or small mixer type application with a USB audio output, you can put that to good use as well. I've talked to several who are using these and their mobile phones temporarily. Now the frequency response is limited, especially on things like smartphones, and the quality may not be as good as a professional mic with processing. But for doing live news breaks or traffic breaks, it's a quick way for broadcasters to send audio remotely in near or real time. So you've got this, which is an entire studio, a broadcast facility. Why not make use of that using remote access into these facilities and using the professional gear you already have in place? It makes sense to do that, and that's what a lot of broadcasters are doing. Starting with some of the basics, encoding audio for the internet. When we've heard lots of technology out there about SIP software, which has broadcast quality codecs like LinPhone and OnSIP, where you can install these on a tablet, PC, or phone. Here we're showing a setup screen for LinPhone, I believe. These codecs use the session initiation, the session initiation protocol, or SIP for short, to start a session between the end device and the main studio or home studio, and then use the SDP protocol, part of that SIP interconnection, to determine which codecs types, bit rates, and so forth to use between the two. So if you have a home studio that may have a tie line with a SIP capability, or another home studio with a LinPhone or OnSIP software-based codec on a tablet or PC, and you can use an AoIP appliance like our Wheatstone Switchblade to negotiate the codecs between them. And we have one of our customer groups setting up Switchblade at the studio head end, and they have any combination of these SIP software or hardware-based codecs on the home studio side. And as a result, when the pandemic hit, they were able to deploy multiple work at home studios at once as soon as things got to the point where we had to stay safer at home. This is a picture of our Switchblade appliance. It's a one rack unit that fits neatly in your rack. And the diagram below it shows some of the signal flow of how we get these internet-based SIP broadcast quality codecs in and out of a facility and into the WheatNet-IP world, where we can use it as sources and destinations, send and receive audio back from surfaces or our blades. Again, it's an audio appliance that enables remote-based SIP codecs or even another Switchblade to use these broadcast quality codecs to make contributions to be delivered to channels on our WheatNet-IP network. Switchblade supports these codecs, including 256K Opus, which can carry a decent amount of dynamic range, and it's fairly robust. Certainly not as robust as linear audio, but it's cheaper to carry that encoded audio across the internet or across a WAN than straight linear audio. Switchblade also includes WheatNet-IP's application control interface, or ACI for short, and that's important if you want to do things like remotely triggering functions in a WheatNet-IP environment, such as controlling a console, turning mics on or off, or other sources on or off while you're carrying it with that signal. Some of the things we talk about with these codecs is delay, and that's kind of one of the things I've been noticing as I've been listening to radio shows across the country, and this is how things can affect if you're trying to do multiple locations all live. With all codecs, there are some measurable lag effects, latency or jitter, that can be a factor for live shows. And this will vary based on some of these conditions I've outlined here in the presentation. One of the first things to impact it is audio encoding and the encoding algorithm. And then the next thing to come along the way is we have to turn these digital audio signals now into packets and transmit them. One of the biggest factors in the latency scheme of things is transport latency or network latency, and this can vary a lot due to dynamic routing through an ISP, depending on if you're using a private WAN or a private link versus a public internet link. And of course, last mile issues always have big impacts on speed, especially in more rural areas where high-speed internet may or may not be as robust as it is in a metro area. The biggest impactor for codecs and delay is forward error correction or receive buffering. Forward error correctioning, again, has this impact, and it's a trade-off between timing of the audio versus continuous and quality audio. Other latency factors include decoding on the receive side and pass through to the endpoint or the next system. And if you're using an AoIP broadcast plant, you could add another quarter to a half millisecond if it goes through the process of being introduced and routed into those systems. And then if you're using AES67, you could see additional latencies of 1 to 5 milliseconds based on what you have going on with some of those devices. Again, listening to shows across the country who've split their show teams up and their talent and the interaction, these lags are having a big impact on how the talent and their content are being interacted with. In lots of locations, they may be getting audio at a significantly different time than the rest of the host. And just the shows are not sounding as tight as normal as they would if they were in studio and in person. So I'm going to flip back to this. We've got our mixing surface, and the idea, you have an entire broadcast studio facility, so why not use it? In most facilities, you'll find one or more of these. This is a LXE mixing surface, one of several IP audio mixing surfaces in the Wheatstone line that you can order as part of a complete WheatNet-IP audio network. Now, we would be happy to supply you with one of these for every home studio you have, but that's probably not as practical and affordable as using some software as an alternative to having a physical console everywhere. So one of the things we bring to bear with this LXE surface is the remote LXE client software. This you can load on a home laptop or PC, and it will mirror the physical surface exactly as the LXE is at your station facility. It's fully functional remote control of the surface at the studio with buttons, knobs, and the familiar navigation and metering screens, including options for adjusting EQ curves, adding filtering or dynamics, and other custom settings. Some of the broadcasters I've talked to have set up a gateway computer somewhere in the building to kind of help protect the main network. and allowed remote access into that, and then they're running the remote interface from that PC, while a user may use a remote access connection or VPN connection to access that gateway computer. The remote LXC screen, the meter screen, looks like this, and it has all the normal stuff that a jock would like to see or gives them in the studio, and it also gives them the confidence they need that they're on the air, because they'll see the metering ballistics and get the instant feedback of what they are controlling. In addition, we get the screen interface for control of the input modules and output modules, and it's identical to how the surface is laid out there in the studio. All your controls are in the exact same spot, and even the OLEDs on the remote LXC are painted back to the remote control interface of the software. Source names, input gain meters, program button names, you name it, they're all displayed here on the remote LXC client. All right, I'm at a point here where I'm going to try to switch and show you the remote LXC client. And we bring that up here, and if I hit connect, you can, hopefully everybody can see the remote screen. I'm going to move this out of the way just a little bit. We'll come back to our presentation in just a minute. But here we're using remote LXC, and I'm connected to a physical surface. This happens to be here at the Wheatstone office in Dallas, Texas, where I'm coming to you from today. And we can see that we have my mic audio also going into the mixing surface on input fader 1, and I can bring the volume up or down, and it impacts going out to the program mix. And I'm feeding audio from my surface into the webinar today. And so any adjustments or changes to a program assignment bus that would take me in or out of the program bus. You can also change other program assignments for aux sends, mix minus sends, and other parameters for the input. We can put the channel in what we call set mode and come back to our screen, and you notice now our screen has changed, and we can change parameters on the input fader for what aux sends we're going to contribute to, what mix minus sends we're going to contribute to, whether the fader is a stereo, mono, or left only, right only, or part of a 5.1 set. We can flip phases, move the pan position on the faders, and also impact the source gain from the screen. We'll come back to the screen for more in just a little bit. Come out of set mode. Other information, again, you can see the source names in the OLEDs, and if you should need to change that, you can use the source selection knob here, and you can move it over and then find a new source and then hit take, and now you change the source on the input fader. On the other side of the screen, or on the far right-hand side, you see as it's laid out on the physical console, our output section where we can control the control room monitor volume, the headphone monitor volume, what we're going to listen to in those buses. And then we can also see we have our talkback buttons available to us for mix minus and for the aux sends, in addition to assignment buttons. We also can control what we call layers on this surface, where the mix engine allows us to have 32 inputs, but my surface only has 12 faders, 12 input faders, so I can add additional inputs on another fader. And you can see on the second row of faders, we don't have anything assigned here, but we could assign another few faders up to 32 here on the surface. And then you can switch the surface back and come back to your first page. Some additional things you can control. We also have an EQ control module. So if you're looking at changing EQ parameters on an input fader, you can use the buttons here in the remote screen, or you can use the visual controls that I'll show you just a moment on the meter screen, the LXE home screen. Additionally, you can set up buttons to change your routings or scenes here on the surface for different show profiles or event profiles. And we can demonstrate that with a button press, which changes the sources assigned to some of these faders, and it also remembers where that fader was, what position it was when you took that event. And then we can always switch those back as we need to. All right, I'm going to switch over here to the LXE meter screen. Again, just to demonstrate all the controls you have, you can see the current event you might be in, and you can change that by going through the events button and selecting the event you would like to take, arm it and take it, and then the surface changes to that particular event. You can also update and or save events if you allow the users that kind of permissions. You have in this screen, the aux MXM screen. These are your master fader controls for your aux sends and your mix minus sends. And you can also determine if those are pre-fader or pre-on off or any combination. We also have the XY panel available here. So this gives us a visual representation of our routing system for WheatNet-IP. Any source or destination visible on the network, we can make that available here in the screen, and users can select a destination anywhere in the system, including their own surface here, and then make also source changes with this, selecting what is feeding what destination and output. We covered our input screen just a moment ago. We can also look at the input screen by going here and then selecting a channel. That's the same as pressing the set button on the surface itself, or through the fader screen, the input fader screen. We can also, while in set mode, adjust dynamics, adding a downward expander or some compression into the mix, and adjusting the parameters visually with selecting the threshold and then moving this fader up or down to adjust items. Or we can select the expander threshold and adjust it as well, moving items in and out. And the same holds true for our EQ settings, where you can click in the grid and move things around, or you can select a parameter individually and use the control fader to adjust where those parameters are going to be, including high pass filtering, low pass filtering, flattening the EQ starting from scratch, or putting in a low shelf or high shelf and then making the EQ engaged or not on that input fader. As with all of our IP-based mixing surfaces, we have an item called presets, and these are preset EQ settings that you can recall and apply to fader inputs as you need and desire to have different scenarios for different EQs for different talent, et cetera, et cetera. One of the features for LXE for this year is auto mix. And auto mix allows you to create a group of inputs and assign those to a program bus and give them different weightings into that program bus, a lot like other auto mixers do. And this feature is also available in many of our TV surfaces. And then additionally, here in the LXE, we also have the ability to run our screen builder scripts here on the LXE surface screen itself. And this gives you the ability to maybe monitor things or change things in the background or around in the studio using some button controls or meters assigned to monitor other inputs or outputs around the facility. So it makes it a really flexible useful tool for the user to have an at a glance of other things coming into the system, where they might want to see meters for certain codecs coming in or going out, or status of certain other sources or destinations in the system, to give them confidence about doing their broadcast from home. We provide the clock, and the clock timing is based on our blade times. They get their times from the blades, and additionally, we provide some other metering options here in the lower left, including a loudness meter. That's the default, but we can change that to a phase analysis meter with the 3 options, and you get an XY phase, or a polar phase, or at least a Joule phase. And again, it's up to the user which phase they would like to see. The loudness meter is probably not for most of you radio groups. You're not interested in that. Some people might be. For a TV plant, you would definitely be interested in your loudness contour. And these can be set to a timer as well, so that you're adjusting or looking at these over your average and weighted time. The only supported reference right now for this in the LXE surface is the 24 dB LKFS A85 mode. Additionally, on the screen, if you had this screen on in the studio and a remote client has connected to that screen, you would see Glass LXE connected, or Remote LXE connected on the screen as you would there in the studio. All right. That was just a quick overview of Remote LXE and how it behaves. So I'm going to switch back over to my PowerPoint, if you don't mind. And let me get back to where we were. Apologies. So we also have similar remote control client software for our Dimension 3 touch television audio surface. And again, it's based on a lot of the same technology. And in the screen here, you get access to all of your input faders, all 64 of them, access to all of your group masters and your stereo or 5.1 masters, in addition to some other controls. And for the D3 touch specifically, you get click-through screens to gain access to the extra input parameters, mix positions, bus assignments, auto mixing, EQ and dynamics control. All that is available through the remote access screen for the D3 touch. We also have similar remote client software for our E-Series consoles and LX24 consoles in radio facilities. That product is called Glass E, and it was our first remote control application. It's been around since 2008, I believe, and it's one of the first virtual mixing applications out there. It's still in use today, and it along with Remote LXE or Virtual Dimension 3 and Glass E require a physical surface to control, or it can be a virtual surface via one of our VMI interfaces or LXE engines. Just depends on which mixer type you need. This particular slide, we're showing the E-Series virtual mixer interface, and it's basically your physical mixer in a box, in a 1-rack unit box, and it's emulating the E-Series surface, and you use Glass E as your only interface into that surface. So the other thing to tell you guys about, and this is new for us this year, and this was in response to huge demand because some of us don't have all these fancy IP routing and mixing consoles. So the product we introduced this month is called Remix, and Remix works with any of your IO blades. So you do need an AoIP blade on your system or somewhere in your system as a building block for the WheatNet-IP audio network. Remix has the ability to control what we call utility mixers or virtual mixers that are contained in these WheatNet-IP blades. Now, this is useful for broadcasters who have a blade or blades for audio ins and outs, but they don't have a surface capable of remote control. And this would be true in the IP world of our IP12 or 16 line of consoles, our PRNE, DMX, EMX line of surfaces, because some of these older surfaces, in addition to our analog line of surfaces from the Audio Arts brand, like the Lightning or the Air 4 or Air 1s, just don't have any type of ACI or computerized or that type of control. These virtual mixers inside of Blade can be used, and you can use this to reroute audio to your air chain, or have another way of controlling assignments to output to your air chain. Assignments to the utility mixer can be made using the WheatNet-IP Navigator software, and you could also pre-build salvos or macros, predefined scenes from logic inputs, which you can also control from the utility mixer interface remix to recall these predefined scenes and make routing changes necessary to use this as a remote mixing application. Any source on the WheatNet-IP network can be assigned to a utility mixer input, and this includes mics, codecs, phone hybrids, automation playout PCs, other PCs like Vox Pro if you're doing editing and playback. All these are available on the network and now are assignable to the utility mixer. And the utility mixer also gives us 2 program buses, so you can on the fly do a quick mix minus to send audio to a codec or phone hybrid if you should desire to do that. And so we'll break away from the presentation again right here, and we'll give a quick live demonstration of Remix. So we'll launch the application, and on the screen you should see the Wheatstone Remix application. And I'm going to show that alongside the view of the utility mixer from here in our Navigator software. And I'm controlling the A side of the mixer with the button here lit, Mixer A. And if I wanted to control the B side of the mixer, I can switch over to the Mixer B. And in here you can see I've got faders pulled down, so they're not contributing to the B output. And that is to allow for a mix minus to be sent from this particular virtual mixer. But as you can see, I've got full control over fader positions. And if I make a change here in the Remix app, it is making the change on the virtual mixer shown in Navigator. Again, if I can adjust things in Navigator and then show the virtual mixer app, that fader is caught back up. It's a near real-time change. We can turn items on and off on these particular channels. Again, assigning codecs, phone hybrids, automation PCs, phones, other PCs, editors, Vox Pro, Adobe Audition, and the like. And in this case, I'm also bringing in a program from the LXE surface. And again, as we discussed earlier, you can program these buttons to fire salvos. And what I've done in the system is I have designed this button to be Remix Scene 1 and this button to be Remix Scene 2. And basically, they're just setting up to fire an SLIO to the blade. And that SLIO is further programmed into the system to launch the salvo or fire the macro that's going to make a routing change here on our utility mixer. You can also select any SLIO on the blade, and there are 128 of them. So if you've already got the SLIOs, some of them assigned on the blade for other things, you don't have to use 1 through 4. You can make this one number 120 if you would like. You can also change the behavior from a momentary press to a latching type relay if you need it. So to demonstrate the scenes, Remix 1 has these inputs assigned, And remix 2, the only thing we're going to change is what's assigned to fader number 8, which is our program return from the LXE. And if I hit that, it's going to change that to a program received from my L8 console, also here in my Dallas studio. Again, full range and volume control available. Again, on the B side, we're showing you ways you can have a codec contribute to a backfeed or not contribute to a backfeed by controlling the B side program assignment. Again, that's followed up here in Navigator. Additionally, we labeled this button TB, but it could be talkback or whatever you would like it to be. It could be a remote start for an automation system or for some other external thing you need to trigger in the background. And again, this was designed to be a quick and easy application to help folks who don't have an E-series or a IP surface with an automation control interface or application control interface. And so it gives you a very flexible way to get audio in and out of the blade and use some remote control and do a live mix for engineering uses or remote home user uses. This app can be put again on a PC and connected to remotely to a system, or it can live on a gateway PC and users can access it and get control of their live mixes going out. All right, we'll get back to our PowerPoint. So this brings up, we talked about the back feeds or confidence monitoring and mix minus, or things we call like bus minus, which are clean feeds for home studios or remote codecs. And a majority of our support calls lately have been based on a lot of this. And most of it is a simple matter of setting up the correct bus minus sends. That's a backfeed from one of our faders minus the source on the fader, or a mix minus send or other send where we have to do a lot of custom mixing before it goes back out. One of the other problems that we've run into is making sure that these happen on an automatic or automated fashion, or overcome the lack of I/O or inputs maybe on a smaller frame surface. And one of the cool things that we have is in our Navigator software, we have a tab called Associated Connections. And what Associated Connections allow us to do is define a trigger connection. And when that trigger connection registers as true, as in the cross point is made, we can define up to 10 subsequent connections to be made when that trigger connection registers true. And again, this makes it a lot easier to automate backfeeds or several backfeeds or sends that you need to do based on some sort of routing condition to get your audio in and out of the system. Again, these are predetermined backhauls or IFBs or mix minuses for each device based on its location in the system or on a fader. It doesn't have to be a fader. It could be another destination in the system. And when the base connection is made, again, you get 10 possible subsequent connections. So social distancing, this is a word I was not ever aware of, but I guess it's now in our new lexicon. There's many ways to social distance your broadcast studios. There are ways to build a studio. One of these popped up in our Facebook feed, and I believe this is from Intercom Seattle, and I think it's the morning show there. So this last slide here is our remote solutions comparison chart. And what we want to make available to you is some ways, depending on what equipment you may or may not have already, If you have one of our legacy TDM surfaces, if it has an ACI, then we have a remote control app for it. The G series, the legacy E series on the TDM side of things, some of our other television-based consoles like the Series 2, the Series 4, the D8, those are either TDM based or TDM IP hybrid based, and we do have remote control apps for those that you can set up again on a gateway type computer or from home to run those surfaces as well. Again, for customers who have like an IP 12 or 16 or one of or analog consoles where there's no remote control, then there's Remix if you have blade infrastructure to accommodate that. One of the things we talked about in our preparation for this presentation was also, well, what can you do if you don't have an AoIP console or a console capable of remote control? You're still using an old school BMX or what have you. Then there's lots of things out there to help you do some remote control. It would be all logic based, and those items are out there and also available for you to set up and design your remote access to your studios. This remote solutions chart, if you contact me directly, robert@wheatstone.com, I can get you a copy of this. It's also available on our website at wheatstone.com/remote solutions or remotes, wheatstone.com/remotes. All right, and I think I'm going to kick it over to
probably me.
Probably you.
Yeah, but you have time for a couple of questions? Excellent presentation, by the way. I really enjoyed that.
Thanks so much. Thanks so much.
First one comes from James, and it says, how do you handle the who has control of the board right now question?
Well, that would be a one at a time item. There would have to be some coordinated handoff with most of these remote solutions because they'll only accept one connection at a time.
Okay. So there's no specifics on that one?
Correct.
Okay. The next question from Sarah says, well, it's not really a question, it's a compliment. She says, we have a glass LXE. I just wanted to say, tell the people watching that if they have lag, the monitor may look as if it's not smooth. Trust me, it's not glitchy. I don't want viewers to confuse their internet lag with the quality of your product.
Oh, well, thank you, Sarah.
That's very nice, actually. And another fellow, Thiago, says, hi, Robert, about associated connections. The navigator needs to be opened or the intelligence is contained inside the blade.
The intelligence...
Does the navigator need to be opened or is this intelligence contained inside the blade?
So the connection data, so once you have to build it in Navigator, it's not buildable on the front panel of the blades.
Mm-hmm.
You do have to build out the scenes in Navigator. However, the data is retained in the blades and it's retained on every blade in the network. So if any one blade goes down, another blade can take over and still process all of those associated connections when they are evaluated true.
Fault tolerant.
Yes.
Okay. Another question from Tom. Remix and a single blade with a few inputs will give you mixing functions like a normal console? Question mark.
It is limited to only 2 program buses and some limited remote control for the faders could be done from an automation system or other outside influence. But yes, you get a lot of functions of a normal broadcast mixer. What it doesn't contain is mute logic and stuff like that. But if you're using it remotely, you may or may not need that mute logic.
Yep. Tom also asks, he says, putting an analog Wheatstone system with bridge router. Does that sound like a question that you can answer, or is that just a comment?
So an analog mixing system with a bridge router. Again, the analog surfaces in our lineup don't have an ACI, generally, a remote control interface for these GUIs to access and make use of. So you would need to either build something physical that fires, relays, GPIOs to turn channels on and off, but automated scene routing and stuff like that may or may not be possible. Now, if you had a bridge router, you do have access to the Xpoint software, and you also have salvos in that particular software that you could fire from logic closures. So you could build a lot of functionality with that, just not maybe necessarily a remote GUI with faders control.
Tom actually qualified his comment. He says using a bridge system with a remix and a single blade is what I meant.
Yes, that could be done, because your inputs IO to the blade are going to come off the inputs or outputs of your TDM system.
Perfect. And from Rojith, did we need a remote license?
Yes,
Does this remote software?
All of these applications that I've showed today and discussed today do require a licensed software purchase.
Okay, excellent. And anything else you'd like to say before we sign off? Robert, thank you for an excellent presentation.
No, again, thank you, Chuck. I appreciate you and Morton and Perry and Rick for helping organize all of this, and our folks on the backside at Wheatstone, Dee and Bob Martin for helping me get the presentation put together. And everybody else in the field there, thanks for your time today. Sorry we're not doing this in Vegas, but we'll see you next year.
We all are.